Good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining today's training. Today's training is sponsored by the Iowa Department of Health and Human Services as part of the Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health contract. The Center of Excellence for Behavioral Health was formed in April 2022 to provide training, technical assistance, and fidelity monitoring for entities responsible for developing and implementing our evidence-based practices for individuals with serious mental illness, serious emotional disturbance, and co-occurring conditions. Our current evidence-based practices of focus are assertive community treatment, of course, individual placement and support, and permanent supportive housing. With that, I hand it over to our speaker, Darcy.
Thanks, Anne. I am joined today by Sherry Becker, who is our first Iowa IPS trainer and fidelity reviewer. So I want to give Sherry a huge thank you for participating today in the documentation training. Today, our goal is to review the milestones. We did have some changes here in the last couple weeks to some paperwork that is going to be new to a lot of you. We want to make sure that everybody understands the funding mechanism for the IPS milestones and what that looks like, what is required for each milestone and the IPS process, and then what documentation is required for each milestone and how to complete it properly. All right, so this is a familiar graph for a lot of you, but you will notice some changes in the documentation. So we'll be going over those here in this training. Because of time, I'm going to speed through. We'll send this out, and I'll also send the documents that have changed after this training. I didn't want to send them out before because I didn't want people to think, what is this? What am I supposed to do with this? So you'll get it afterwards, and I'll send along a copy of this chart. Okay. A lot of the documents that we have now are more in line with IPS fidelity for the milestones. Whereas before, when we first started with IPS in Iowa, we were doing the best that we knew how at the time. Now that we've got a little bit better handle on IPS and fidelity and the requirements, we wanted the documentation to align more with what documentation is required for fidelity, just to have that cohesiveness. You can see that a lot of the documentation that is required for your fidelity reviews is now also required for milestones and vice versa. So there are just a couple forms that don't line up, but they all serve their purpose. Okay, and Sherry will take it over from here.
She can get herself unmuted. Thanks a lot, everybody. Okay, so the career profile is really the foundation of the IPS process. There are 3 approved formats, and I know that you could get all of those from Darcy if you wanted to pick. It not only helps you gather information, though, it really helps you build a relationship with the job seeker and the person you're serving. Strong relationships, I'm speaking to the choir, but they are the formation for success. And I think that's IPS loads heavy in the front, spending time with people so you really get to know them. It also helps you get to know your coworkers, and integration in this process is so important. So the people you're working with, like the teams, the families, the VR counselor, the behavioral health team, all these people are integral to the IPS process. The career profile is not just another form, right? I can't stress enough how important it is that you familiarize yourself with that, with the questions in the profile. Don't read off the form. You don't form a relationship by having the Spanish Inquisition and firing questions at a person. We only get to do that during the fidelity reviews. Wink, nudge, nudge. It's great if you can work closely and even complete or ask questions of the career profile when you're together with your colleagues. So if you're in with the VR counselor, if you're in a behavioral health meeting with the client, or if you're with the family, ask questions then. It takes the pressure down too. A one-on-one conversation doesn't always give people the time they need to think about their answers, but if there's more people involved, it makes it easier. Take your time. The best practice says this should take at least a few weeks to complete.
And I wanted to jump in there also real quick because Sherry mentioned taking time to ask the VR counselors and the team and everything. And we've got such a wonderful VR partnership in Iowa, and our counselors in Vienna have really streamlined the process to where we are trying to do the career profile when the vocational counselors are doing their intake, so that the clients aren't having to answer the same questions over and over and over, and you're doing it together as a team and you're gaining the same information at the same time.
So the career profile is a living document. That means it changes all the time. This slide really highlights the key areas, and that's the reason that there's 3 formats that have been approved, because they include all of this information. It's important that you use those documents and get all those questions, or as many of them as you can, answer, because it will help you be more successful when you initiate the job search. So the first meeting sets the stage for the relationship. It's redundant, but I just want you to know that it's so important that you make this profile and that you use it to its fullest potential. You need to sit with the person. You need to not have paper in front of you. You need to listen generously. And that means more than just not talking all the time. Give the person your undivided attention. Try to give them the time and the space they need to express themselves. And for a lot of people haven't been heard, and they're not used to being encouraged to speak and share what they think. And this is important to this. I think you got to let go of the need to agree or disagree. That's not what you're doing there. None of you would be judgmental, but you don't want to do that either, right? You want to be curious. Don't jump to any conclusions, and just pay attention and listen to understand what the person is trying to tell you. Remember that any conversations, phone calls, emails, even voicemails, set a tone and create a feeling for the other person. In every interaction, we want to make sure that you're friendly. You want to be helpful, courteous, professional. Like the side says, be hospitable, please. Take your time. Be okay with not knowing everything all at once. Use what you and your team members already know in the beginning and just try to build on that. I think it's really important to explain why you're asking, right? This is why we need to know this, not just because the form asks it, but have the rationale behind it. Ask open-ended questions. Again, build the profile over several meetings, and then make sure it's incorporated into the clinical file, because you want that supports integration.
So as part of the career profile process and getting to know the clients and their preferences, we also want to know what their preferences are for disclosure. And an easy way to have this conversation with your clients is to do a disclosure worksheet. And I have the location here of where the form is found if you don't already have one that you use. But using a disclosure worksheet will help to explain to clients what disclosure is. We know that disclosure is whether or not the client is willing to let the employer know that they have a mental illness. They need to understand that that's what that means, because we throw around disclosure all the time, but that sometimes can just mean nothing to a client unless you really explain what it means. The disclosure worksheet also lays out a list of kind of common pros and cons of disclosure. We can share that with the client and then get their list of pros and cons, because they may have the same common pros and cons, but they may have their own that are unique and individualized to themselves. But most importantly, it gives them a choice of whether or not they want to disclose or not. And disclosure is an issue that will come up throughout your time working with a client, because their decision may change depending on what may happen in job experiences, personal experiences. We always want to check in and make sure that we are job developing and all of that as far as the client's preferences are. We also want to find out what sorts of information it's okay to share and not share about our clients with employers. So after we do the career profile and work out the disclosure, we will start with a job search plan. So I have a copy of the form here. If your view has a list of the participants, you can always change the view at the top of the list so that you can see the form a little bit better. But this is how we're going to help that person find a job. Number one, we want to find out what their preferences are. So preferences aren't only what they want to do and where they might want to do it. Preferences include all sorts of factors. It could be, do they want to work in a job that's fast paced or a job that's more slower paced? Do they want a job that's repetitive motions or ever changing? Do they want to work with people or do they want to work more individually? So all those things that are most important to that person, we want to list out in order of most important to least important. And then again, we want to talk to them about disclosure because, like I said, we're going to be visiting that with them quite often. And then what are some places that they might like to work? Have you ever thought about working here or there? Get their ideas, and that way you'll have a plan of what employers you can approach. And then in their own words, what is their employment goal? So what do they want to do and why do they want to do it? And what do they hope to gain out of their job? And so the second page of the job search plan, we're going to dig into their strengths. So what do they identify as being their strengths? And then what do we see as their strengths? And again, tap into their clinical team, their other supporters, their VR counselors, their family members, because oftentimes clients may struggle with coming up with what their strengths are, but outsiders can usually always see what their strengths are and what they may be good at, what might be some good environments for them. And then we're going to do a plan of action. So for the objectives, what are we going to do first? Who's going to do it? How often? And then what is our target date of completion of those items? This is a brand new form. So for each milestone, we really want to demonstrate progress. So what progress have we made in our working with someone from the last milestone? So this is the living document, kind of like the career profile. For the first milestone, of course, we're not going to have any employment information because they don't have a job yet, but we can add all the information in the first section that goes through who else are they working with? What's their employment goal? Once you complete the first milestone, which is completing the career profile and the job search plan, then you'll mark that first box. So then you'll skip the first or the second section, the employment information. And then for updates and changes, you're just going to go and add a little bit of information down in there about what sorts of things you found out during your career profile development. And then progress. So what have you worked on other than the career profile with the client, and what are your plans of how to help them with the job? Okay, we have a question here. And Alicia, if you feel free to speak up, guys.
I'm
Okay,
just,
well,
you were talking when I typed it. So,
oh yeah, no problem.
so right now, like this to me seems like it's what we do in like our quarterly reports that we're submitting with billing. So I'm just wondering, is this on top of the quarterly report?
No, is that the one that is basically a job search form or not job start form?
No, it's like it talks about like their job development plan, like their coaching plan. Are they disclosing what are the updates that happened in this quarter? Ongoing support. I can send you what we have for that, but we have to submit that quarterly with our billing.
Okay, yeah, I'll take a look at what you have, but I would think that this covers what you explained.
Okay. And this would just be
Um,
each time you bill.
yeah, with
Okay.
each milestone, you'll update it.
So I have two questions, Darcy. The first one is, I'm assuming this will take place effective July 1, the scenario, or are we starting it now?
Vienna, do you have
And then
any
that was my second question, is this
preference?
for IPS and CO billing? Oh, you just got a question too.
I think we just need to make sure we have a contract with Steel, is these rates.
And yes, okay. And then Ken, do you need these things for the region too?
Okay, so I'm pretty sure there was like multiple questions in there. So I apologize if I don't answer them all. One, yes, let's make this effective July 1. And then I think as far as, is this a requirement? We're going to, because some of them aren't required, right? Like the disclosure statement, that's not required. And then there's one thing that VR requires, but I'm not sure. I need to talk with my local offices because it's really about what they need to help them make the next step decision and what to authorize and stuff like that. And that is the job search form. That's where capture all of the businesses that you go to and stuff like that. So that form I noticed wasn't on as a required, but for VR, that's normally a required for job development. And so I need to make sure for my local office, if that's something they wish to continue getting, or if maybe somewhere in these current already
it should be in there,
I did
Vienna.
see it on there actually, Vienna, of a business log, business contact log.
To reduce the multiple reports that you have to do, maybe we won't need that anymore. But I don't know. I'm sorry, there was so many questions. That's all that I got to, that I caught, that I could answer.
It was mainly those two, and then obviously because we partner with the region for those kinds of things, and but that's probably a conversation Ken and I will have in the background on if he's going to want copies of this. Do you want copies of this when we go to submit things for people?
The SEAL region just needs to know if somebody, okay, so we put the Medicaid rates into the contract. And so if the Medicaid rates change at all, we need to know that so that we get that into our billing system to make sure we pay the right amount if we ever pay any of the milestones. Most of the time, voc rehab and Medicaid have been paying the milestones, but if they get denied from both voc rehab and Medicaid, then it's possible that the region may pay the milestones if they're eligible. So in that case, any documentation you have would be helpful if you want the region to pay for it, but it'd be very few people, so it should be easy.
Okay, thank you, Ken.
Yep.
And yeah, thank you. Thanks for the questions. And so the rationale for this form was because we had two forms that I saw that were being done that didn't seem to serve an IPS purpose per se. We had one that was basically just completing all the information of a job start form over and over for every milestone with no new information. So to me, if I am somebody who is approving payment, that's not giving me any new information. I want to know what progress is being made. So that's why I thought this would be helpful so that we can demonstrate what have we done, what progress is updated. We were also doing that monthly career profile update form. And we know that we don't always update the career profile on a monthly basis because things don't change on a monthly basis. So if this is required for every milestone, that doesn't happen every month, but we can just go in and update what does change and then what progress is made and eliminate, one of those two forms and combine them into one that seems to have a better purpose. So I hope that makes sense.
So sorry, Darcy, this will replace the job start report and the 45-day report then, or it's
the 45-day report is not going to be required anymore, but yes, the job start form is still, that's an IPS required form.
So it'll be the job start report and this and the placement reports. Is that what I'm understanding?
Yeah. So
Okay.
I'll send all this out
Okay.
with the chart. So for your first milestone, it will be this form, the career profile, and your job search plan.
Okay.
Alicia,
And then go ahead.
I just wanted to clarify the progress report that you're talking about on the quarterly basis that you turn in with your claims that you're talking about. Is that more for waiver?
That is just what I was told to do. So we're supposed to do the quarterly reports, and it's literally like all this stuff under the updates and changes. And we submit that with VR and HAB. And if they want it, if they don't, but that's what we do. And we have them all saved.
And
Okay.
Mandy, maybe do you guys do quarterly reports? Are you required by anybody to do quarterly reports?
No, we don't. Just the ones that we were doing for you guys when we report on the community learning calls.
Okay.
So there's those that we might do, but we don't have to submit them to our funders per se.
Okay. I wonder if that's just something that 43 North Iowa is doing that you don't have to do.
I don't know, but we're gonna get rid of it now with this.
Sounds like a plan.
Good for you, girl.
So here is your first milestone. So once you have completed the career profile and your job search plan, then you're going to complete that Iowa IPS milestone progress report to demonstrate the work that you've done. And then those are your required documents to send in, along with, if you're sending to VR, your completed authorization form, or for HAB, the getting it into the record and doing your regular HAB billing. I missed a question here. Is this information being sent to all the providers? Yep, I'll be sending it to everyone who provides IPS. Thanks for the question. Okay, so any questions so far about milestone number 1 and the changes? Clear as mud? Okay, all right. And Sherry, it'll be your turn.
Yeah. Okay, so you got that done. You're ready to start the job search, but you continue building trust with the person, right? Every person's unique. Everybody has their own worldview. You need to figure out what people's are and what are their challenges and frustrations. As you get to know them, they'll share more of that, right? Because you have a trusting, solid relationship. Keep gathering information all the time. Keep updating as you can. And I think the form that I'm really impressed with, the progress form that Darcy just showed you guys and put it together, because it's going to make it easier to capture that. And the other thing is, those of you who are new to this process, I think you're pretty lucky actually, because the forms are really starting to more closely align with Fidelity and the way you demonstrate what you're doing. And everything is more purposeful. In the beginning, we tried to use forms that people already had, right? And we're just honing all that. So it's getting better and better. Congratulations. Anyway, keep expanding those employer relationships. You can't get a person a job if you don't nurture those relationships, and keep refining the job search, because as people grow and learn more about themselves, things change, right? And their initial decisions might not be what they decide today. So you keep doing all that until you get the job. We update that milestone progress report. Do you guys need to go back to see that, or do you know what we're talking about now? Is everybody good? Okay. All right. Make sure that there's any changes, or update any changes in the career profile. I'm thinking that form might be enough, but if you want to go back and make any changes on the career profile, that would be great too, to record it, because you want to show that's a living document as well. Darcy, what's your recommendation for them on that? What about updating changes or preferences on the career profile if you've done it on the progress report?
Yeah, the IPS Center requires or considers changes to the career profile as your job start forms, your job end forms. If you have those forms in your record, it's really up to you if you want to update any information on the career profile itself. But if we have that milestone report that is being updated with sections of the career profile in it, then during fidelity reviews, it's going to demonstrate that you are keeping that information updated when it
Perfect.
changes, as it
Perfect.
changes.
Perfect. Thank you. We also want to revisit right now disclosure and benefits planning. Those things should come up more than once, right? When people's situation is changing. All right, the rest of that is pretty self-explanatory in terms of time. Let's go to the next slide. So the job development log, that's the one that Vienna was talking about earlier. It's really important that this is filled out so that for each client, used to be some confusion because people kept a log and it wasn't individualized, but this will be important that it's individualized for each job seeker. Are there any questions about that? And I believe that this form is, the paperwork again is consistent from habilitation to Iowa vocational rehabilitation, and that makes it easier. So I think it's great when Ken said, just send the same information across the board. If you standardize this, it just takes a lot of confusion out of it. And remember, you want those contacts to be in person with the person that can make a hiring decision. Okay, let's go to the next slide.
Sherry?
Yes.
I'm sorry, I want to, because I don't want providers to be confused, because we actually have two forms. That's the monthly report log, and then there's also a job development log. And we can definitely use one or the other, but that's what I was referring to in terms of which one my local offices want to do, because the job log is for every business that they encounter. And then for this job monthly report, it's really to get a picture of how their job development, what did they learn about that individual as they completed job development? What were some issues that they had to help that person work through, versus like capturing what happened with each employer that they went to. I hope that makes sense.
Okay. I think it would be interesting for us to hear from some of the participants that are providing the service about that.
Yes.
I feel like it would make sense to standardize it to a one form across all, because I think you get into the weeds where you start including additional forms for one person versus like your whole caseload, and it can get a little overwhelming. So having one, like if VR will accept that form, or if they want to add to that form, I feel like that would be better than having two separate forms, in my opinion.
I have to agree with Alicia on that one, just because we have so many that we have like a 50-50 split caseload. So we have VR, and then we have people who are HAB funded or region funded or whatever. And to have to differentiate the documentation that's required for each of them. So like right now with our VR folks, we don't submit the separate job development form that we would for people in traditional non-IPS job development. We submit what was the placement report or job start form, and then we would also include potentially basically the stack of business logs that we touch base with for that particular employee. So I don't know if that needs to change or be different, but
yeah. And I think Amanda, Mandy, I think you were in the process of sending me that form that you guys use, and we were trying to get it ADA compliant. So once we get that, Darcy, I'll send it over to you, and that'll replace that monthly report form.
Thanks, you guys. I think that's terrific. This is on the to-do list then. We're not going to resolve this right this minute, but I think this is the time to bring forth those issues. Thanks a lot, Vienna.
Thank you. I'm all for stream, and I know my field office are also like, oh, there's so many documents that we have to look at when they turn in. So this is great that you guys provide us feedback.
There was one person that wrote in, Brittany said it would be great if the forms were standardized across the board. Just makes it easier. All right, so milestone 2, when the person starts their first day on the job, it's time to bill for that. And again, you'll include that IPS milestone progress report with the updated information. you'll submit that job development monthly report and the job start form. Any questions? Okay, thanks. Back to you, Darcy.
All right. So once they get a job, our goal is to help them maintain their employment and how to support them in maintaining that employment. So again, we're going to continue gathering information, complete their job support plan, and complete their employment training plan. So for the milestone report, again, we're going to review what we've already got, make any changes, updates to their preferences, any updates to that career profile section, document any goals they might have as far as career advancement, because on IPS, we talk about getting them a job, and that's great, that's wonderful, but it doesn't always stop there. We don't stay in the job that we start in, so our clients don't either. Are they wanting to advance at the same business, maybe look for a better job, maybe a training program? All of those kind of things we're looking at during this phase. And then again, we're going to track the progress since the last milestone, and then include a brief summary of any needs or assistance that you've provided since the last milestone. So this is our job support plan, and this is from the IPS website. So if you've got one that you're using with the same information, this is what we are going to be using for how to support the person in their job. Again, we want to just learn about the job, learn what sort of strengths they have that will help them to maintain their job. Who are their natural supports, and who are their supports on the job that we can tap into? What sorts of things are needs of theirs that will help them to keep their job, like transportation, special tools or uniforms, things like that. Disclosure, again, we're going to address and see, do they want us to have contact with their supervisor? And if so, what type and how often? And it's important, of course, to get a release of information if they do want us to have contact with their employer. So then thinking outside of the job, who else can we set them up with? Because we're not always going to be around. So once we are stepped out of the picture, who can the person rely on for support? So we need to build that structure up as well. And then on the second page, we have what types of support they need, where those supports are going to be provided at. So whether it's at the job, outside of the work site, when and how often, and then, sorry, I can't, yeah, by who, sorry. Couldn't see, I didn't switch my view like I told everybody else to do. Okay, so the employment training plan is going to evaluate what skills the client has, what are their certain specific job duties, and we're going to find out what the sequence of their job duties is as well, so that we can see where they need assistance. Also, how they do at their job duties. So are they completely independent in that task? Are they still learning that task? Or is it an area where they need some additional job coaching and instruction?
We have a fair amount of individuals that don't want support on the job. So how do you go about having the IPS specialists fill this out if they're not able to observe that sequence of tasks? Do we just get that from supervisor, or what is?
Well, yeah, if you're able to get it from the supervisor, but if they don't disclose, I would just go through this form with the client and just say, tell me about your job duties. Tell me how comfortable you are at doing it. And just ask them questions about how they do it, so that I know it's hard to, because some people will tell you, oh yeah, I'm great at that. But
they're great at everything.
Yeah, you kind of have to dig in and find out, get them to really give you some, you know what I mean? Just could try to dig in to see how well they are doing at the job or the job duties if you're able to. But yeah, otherwise, if you can't go to their job, you can't talk to their supervisor, it is difficult to gauge these skills. Or you can just say unable to observe.
Yeah,
Client did
that
not
was really,
disclose.
yeah, that was what I was wondering, if we put that or if we talk through that, because I think that happens more often, especially in factory work, because around here they go through staffing agencies and
Yeah.
like business owners, they won't allow us on site to do those tasks. So either put non-observable or ask the client to go through with you.
Yeah. And I would ask the client to go through it with me first and then write what they say. And then you could put a blurb in there. Client reports this, but unable to observe. And then you're covered on all angles. Okay, so we discussed that as well. Okay, you can go to the next slide. So that completes our third milestone for the second job development milestone. So again, we're going to update the milestone progress report, submit the completed job support plan, and the completed employment training plan. And that's at 45 days of employment also.
So you now have completed the third milestone, and it's time for you to begin thinking about and helping the person prepare for the transition to longer term supports. You want to get them to that 90-day mark and then start to consider whether or not you're going to have to prepare for perhaps habilitation tier funding if a person needs more support, depending upon how they're achieving that employment training plan or what kind of support they want. So continue doing the job coaching like in that job support plan. Make sure that you try to engage even more your behavioral health partners in this, because they're the ones who are going to be there for the long term. And hopefully we'll be talking to people about their jobs in the sessions when they meet with them. You also want to build the natural supports, right? Who are the family and friends or even coworkers who are instrumental in helping this person maintain their success? Think about yourself. We all have those people that we work with that make us a better worker because we can look to them for feedback and support. So those are important kinds of things to think about. And then, of course, you're going to update that employment training plan. Go to the next slide as time goes on. And then you're going to complete that updated documentation. When you're getting close to 90 days now, you're going to review that progress report. You're going to track that changes in preferences if there are any, their career advancement goals, really important at this point, because you may be disengaging and you want the person to start thinking about this. You may be involved for long-term support, but you still want to really focus on, is this job satisfactory right now? And what do you want to do in the future? It was a great question that Darcy asked at the beginning. What's your dream job? We're all doing stuff now, but we all think about the future. Even retired people think about it. So anyway, include all that, review that employment support plan. And then when you have agreed upon the 90 days with the VR counselor and they've been successful, you can submit for milestone 4. Congratulations. You want to do the IPS milestone progress report, and you want to complete that employment training plan and submit that with milestone 4. Any questions? All right, thanks. Darcy.
Okay, and so for milestone 4, again, it's really just an update of the forms that you've already done. Hopefully on their employment training plan, we're seeing some progress in their skill level at their job tasks. Another form, and I know we're at 103, so I'm going to hurry through this. Our job end form is not required for any milestones, but it is required for fidelity. So anytime that a client has a job end for any reason, I'm not going to say job loss because sometimes they're voluntary job ends. So we want to find out, why did the job end, so that we can learn lessons from that for the next job and helping them find their next job. if we're able to get perspective from their employer about the job loss or job end, we want to document that so that we can provide feedback to the client about that as well. Also getting feedback from the VR counselor, and then what feedback we have, family members as well, mental health team. And then we're going to update benefits planning information. So who is going to be responsible for letting the entitlement systems know about the job end? And then did their preference for disclosure change? Okay, that's it. Only 4 minutes late. Okay. So any final questions? And then, like Vienna said, we're going to take a look at that job development form and let you all know what's decided. So thank you very much. Have
Thanks
a
for
wonderful
inviting
day.
me. Nice to see everybody.
Yeah, thank you, Sherry.
Hi, good